We're talking Faith football and the finals, the AFL Grand Final, the Collingwood Magpies up against the Brisbane Lions tomorrow. Shaun Hart, a genuine AFL legend of the game, played his best years at the Brisbane Lions. Shaun is with us. Hey Shaun, welcome along to 2020.
Thank you very much. Great to be along, and sorry for any issues early. I've hopefully rectified it now.
Hey Shaun, even at this very moment, you're in Melbourne and there is a Grand Final parade that happens on the eve of the AFL Grand Final. You know what it's like to be sitting in those cars and being driven through the streets and cheering fans. What's it like when you're in those Grand Final processions?
It's absolutely exhilarating, to be honest. It's really amazing to see just how many people do come out. They love the game of AFL, of course, in Victoria more than anywhere almost, it seems, and people flock from all over Australia to be part of Grand Final week, in particular the parade and the big day on Saturday. So it's very, very exciting. It's funny, as an athlete involved in the game, though, you soak it in, but it's a really nice time. But then as soon as the parade's done, you get back to the hotel and the mind starts ticking over again about what's ahead and what challenges lay ahead to be able to actually take the premiership the next day.
One of the reasons I feel very privileged to have you as part of 2020 today and just get some reflections from you is that the Lions are trying to win their first AFL premiership since 2003. When they were beaten when you beat the Magpies. And look, this was one of your Grand Final wins. So in some sense, what's happening with the Lions tomorrow, you've been there and done that. Is there a special rivalry with Collingwood?
Yeah, it's quite remarkable, really, that 20 years on, where the same teams are going at it. You know, we're about to celebrate. We are celebrating literally the team of 20 years ago, the reunion of that premiership 20 years ago, and all of a sudden the same two teams are going at it. We're desperately hoping that our Brisbane Lions can break through to win their first premiership since 2003. But then we've got one of our beloved Lions players, Craig McRae, coaching the opposition club. Who would have ever thought one of our Lions players would have coached the horrible Collingwood Football Club? And yet many of Australians have come to actually love Collingwood a bit more this year because of him. Because of Craig McRae and what he represents and how he goes about his coaching. So it's a little bit interesting just what's happening. Even Michael Voss's team as well getting to preliminary final. It's amazing how many Brisbane players have been involved deep in September this year.
How do you deal with the nerves, performance anxiety, issues around, getting ready? And of course, we want to include a faith dimension in our conversation today because a lot of listeners will know that you've got a tremendous rock-solid faith and we've been able to observe that for many years. But when you're dealing with those sorts of issues, is there a spiritual dimension for players getting ready, dealing with the nervousness of going into a grand final?
Oh, certainly I would say there is. It's whether or not it's recognised by each individual. But certainly for me, there was some the pressure of any game of AFL football, let alone a game with the result and the prize at the end of it for a grand final, is just enormous. And so, I mean, the great story I love to tell for me personally is the reality of my faith, my faith in Jesus and my faith in a bigger picture, I suppose, beyond performance that helped me overcome real fear throughout my career, but particularly the story I like to tell in Grand Final week of 2001, and when we made our first Grand Final, I had an incredible wave of fear of failure come over me, and I had to find a way to deal with that fear, to deal with that anxiety, and to deal with that pressure. And I turned to God's Word and found Philippians 4:13 to be my perfect partner for the week, and I meditated on that scripture. I can do all things through Christ who strengthens me throughout that week. And I got onto Grand Final day, onto the MCG, as there was some anxiety, no doubt about some, exhilaration as well running out there. But I just felt better than I've ever felt before a game. I just knew that God was with me. I knew that He would look after me. He helped me through the pressure and to survive the pressure. And surely enough, it was a fantastic day for us and our Brisbane Lions team.
I know that all sports fans are thrilled that you have worn your faith proudly and you've been open with your faith. I wonder if you've got a little in a nutshell testimony here of when you came to faith in Christ, and we can talk about how that carries you through challenges, but give us an idea of your personal testimony.
Yeah, probably to keep it pretty sharp. I was a young footballer and had built all of my whole identity, my whole purpose, my whole meaning of life ultimately on becoming a rich and famous footballer. You know, my whole journey of life was going to be about football, and that was my uni focus really, in terms of I didn't have anything else, didn't have a plan B. And when that started to disappear a little bit, when that dream started to fade, when I was really struggling, I happened to meet and work with a lady who now is my wife, Linda, her name is, and she just had a different spirit and a different character about her. And I was a bit of a moody guy, a guy that would rise and fall and have an identity and purpose all tucked away in football and nothing else, and all really in myself almost. And ultimately, I particularly when I felt my career, that I just felt like, well, who am I? What am I up to? What's the meaning of my life? And I was really seeking, really searching, really empty, to be honest. And I actually went along to church on the Gold Coast with her, and ultimately I was hoping to build a relationship with her, yes, but certainly I was looking and seeking to find out a greater meaning, a greater purpose, a higher purpose for my life. And sure enough, that day I heard a European lion tamer, Case Shiragi, his name is, talk and testify about Jesus, and about Jesus being the lover of our soul, and understanding then that it was an enemy of our soul as well, who'd like to steal, kill, and destroy. And I, in hearing his testimony and hearing the truth that he spoke about, and then sitting in the church that day and listening, and he made a comment late in his sharing. He said, "You know what? You could be a footballer with all the fame and fortune you ever wanted, but in the end, what would it be worth if you sold your soul to get it?" And you referred to Mark 8:36 in the scripture of selling a soul to gain the whole world. What would it be worth? And it just spoke to me. It spoke to me and really capped off everything that he'd said before that, and helped me to understand that there's an identity and purpose, true identity and true purpose that we need to discover, that really sets us up to understand how or why we're here and how to live our life. And I discovered that on that day, and I'm very thankful that I did. I'm very thankful that God revealed that to me, because my life may not have been continuing. To be honest, I've had some dark times I've worked through, but because of that moment of coming to faith, the greatest decision I've ever made, I was able to continue to play football, fortunately, and also continue to live life on purpose, for the purpose that God created me for.
We mentioned these days you're working with Bond University and coaching programs, 3D as in three-dimensional. When you're dealing with young players, those aspirations, no doubt the same as the aspirations you had, and identity and purpose in football alone. How important is it, for those young players to discover that there is a bigger dimension, that there is a faith in God dimension that can actually carry them through, especially through those times of disappointment and loss?
Oh, it's enormously significant. In 3D coaching, we talk about in the third dimension. So we talk about being a coach who can understand how to coach and build strategies to coach in all three dimensions of the being. Most coaches, 80% in fact, only coach in the first dimension, the physical athlete, and strength and speed and endurance, those sort of things. And then skills and tactics, those things, they just focus on that area alone, 80% of coaches. And yet 15 to 20 focus on the second dimension, the mindset or the psychology of sport, and then only 5 or 10% have strategies to coach elements or attributes of the third dimension. And those 6 attributes that I talk about there are identity, purpose, self-worth, value, where you get your value from, character, and significance. Those 6 elements, we believe, are the executive center of who people are. And if we are not actually coaching people and leading people in those, and they don't understand who they are through that lens first and foremost, for me, I understand that's what helped me understand and how to get to my personal best, how to understand my purpose, so that I could then live it out in a true identity, empowered to be the best that I could be in the gifts that God has given to me. If we don't help young athletes understand that, then they end up building an identity and purpose on anything they can grab a hold of that makes them feel valued, loved, and belong. And only God can truly can truly satisfy those needs in every human being.
Bringing that dimension that you do, you can help shape the future of the game, because as those players capture some of that wisdom, it is just so precious, invaluable. Hey, what's it like running onto the MCG? Thinking of this year's Lions this weekend, the Lions back. They haven't had a great record playing at the MCG. They've won only one of their past 15 games there. So do those sorts of things impact on how tomorrow's grand final might look?
Well, they'll run out there tomorrow, and yes, it'll be the MCG. It will just be the greatest roar a player can ever hear around them in the stadium. It's just so noisy, so amazing, electric atmosphere. So it will be incredible for them. You almost feel like a player running out, and despite the fact you're playing on a ground as a Lions player that you rarely play on, that almost won't calculate in their mind at all, to be honest. So that's what I think. Now, the previous record's interesting because they were 5 goals up against Melbourne in the last quarter, and Melbourne were able to find 5 late goals to beat them by under a goal very recently. So the record does look poor, but the reality of that is they only play there a couple of times a year. So there's a real lack of opportunity, and that I think breeds a fair bit of the getting used to that game. I just think there's something different about a grand final. I really do. I think, as I said before, they'll come out there and they'll know they've just got to put the actions into place that they've been able to do to be able to survive the pressure and to be able to win the big games. And I think they'll understand that. And if they can do that, if man to man they can stand together and survive the pressure by putting into place the actions that have held them in good stead, the ground won't matter, the conditions won't matter, the opposition won't matter. They'll get it done, and I'm really confident they can get it done because I think they've learnt a lot from their past finals experiences, and I think we'll see a very close grand final. But I think hopefully, this is my prediction, I think we'll see them win by a point tomorrow, the Lions.
Here's an interesting one for you. Where do you think the rest of the nation will sit? Because in some sense, the nation loves to hate Collingwood. You either love or you hate Collingwood. Do you think that, listeners today in Western Australia or in South Australia, those in Tassie or in New South Wales, who do you think they'll be mostly barracking for? Will they be on the Lions side or will they be on the side of the Magpies?
Well, we know that once there were half of Australians that barracked for Collingwood. I'm not sure if that's a reality anymore, but there are a lot of Collingwood fans, and most of the crowd will be Collingwood tomorrow. But what I sense again, and even reflecting back 20 years or so when we did play Collingwood, I sense that the rest of the crowd will rise as Brisbane starts to rise, and they'll sense that there's a bigger audience here and a crowd and support here than the colours we actually see. There's a lot of people who are dressed in colours that aren't ours that will rise when we go, because either they don't like Collingwood or I've got to barrack for the other team because I'm an Essendon supporter or a Carlton supporter or whatever it might be. Having said that, Collingwood have grown in the love around Australia, again, because of Craig McRae and because of the way he coaches, because of the way he builds a club on family values. That's been significant. So I think there'll be a few more that will just lean a little bit Collingwood's way. And I'm just excited. I'd be excited. I'd love it if Brisbane could win. But to be honest, if Collingwood are the better team on the day, then I'll be very happy for Craig McRae.
Sean, just picking up for a moment on one of the big challenges that you've battled with, perhaps even right from earlier years, and that's the issue of depression. You've had bouts of that. Give us an insight here into depression and how you've faced that as a man of faith.
Yeah, well, it was the darkest time, no doubt, in my life. I've shared it many times. There was a real point where I really struggled to reach the sort of form I needed to in the game. And our coach, Lee Matthews, used to talk about a little cycle where you'd start with enthusiasm, you'd put in the hard work, and then the cycle would finish with success. And when that wasn't happening for me and I had done all the hard work and put the enthusiasm in and the success wasn't coming, all of a sudden, what came over me really, again, was fear. I'd always been someone really that battled with a little bit with inadequacy and fear as a young person, not so much anxiety, but getting into the big league and the pressure of AFL football, certainly that grew a little bit. But this whole idea of the fear of loss, of the dream that I had, the one plan I had, the thing I wanted to build my identity and purpose in, became so paralysing at a time in 1994, actually, that I really battled, and I let fear actually win. That's why I say I let fear win. I'm fortunate that I had two people particularly as I said, my wife Linda at the time, and our football club chaplain, Dean Davis. I'm so fortunate to have him alongside me at that time, walking with me, coming from Brisbane to the Gold Coast regularly to just support me and just to continue to help me to keep the dream alive, because I was just wanting to walk away, to be honest. I hated football, almost wanted to get away. Such was my mindset. I was absolutely crippled in terms of all three of my dimensions, particularly physically. As an elite athlete, I could barely run 5 minutes without being exhausted, so I was in a bad spot. I found myself getting tucked into bed, covering myself with the covers, just wanting to escape the world for about 6 weeks straight, to be honest, while Dean tried to just keep helping me get out of bed, get out and go to training and just do the minimal that I had to do to keep the wheels turning. And as I said, I let fear win. I didn't step into faith at the time when the greatest challenge and the darkest time came in my life. But I'm so thankful that God's people were around me to help me and to survive that time. I'm just thankful to be alive today because of that. We're losing too many people in sport and in the world because of a lack of probably confidence and trust and support in people. So I've just learned, and again, that's why 3D coaching is so significant to me, because I think if we coach the right way, we capture the hearts of people, we capture their minds, and we actually help them thrive and flourish, which is what God intends for us all. So I found my way out of that dark time thanks to Dean, thanks to my wife Linda. But it was certainly a real learning curve for me about what the power of faith can do and how important it is where we put our faith.
A lesson there too, given that Christians are not immune from facing bouts of depression, but there is something that I'll get your thoughts on here, this empowerment that comes from your appreciation that there is a transcendent God who has your back, who does have you in the palm of his hand. How powerful is it knowing those things when you're facing those dark moments and looking for a light at the end of the tunnel?
Oh, it's so powerful. I just want every person to encounter the reality of that, experience the reality of that, because when the revelation is true, it becomes true for you that is right, that there's a God who created you, who loves you regardless of failings, successes, whatever it might be, that just loves you as you are, as he created you to be, then there's no greater freedom, to be honest. And certainly in terms of that dark time, when I realised that God is for me, not against me, and he's created me for a purpose. And when I could take the pressure off thinking that I'm making my own purpose, my own way, it's all about footy for me, all of a sudden the fear of losing went away from me in terms of losing my career. I was happy to go wherever God would place me, but the actual anxiety around football performance as well disappeared a fair bit. It didn't go completely, as we know, it still exists there, but it didn't become so significant that it became crippling at times. So I was able to, through that reality, the revelation of the love of God, I was a lot freer in terms of just moving forward in my football and my life in every way.
Really encouraging to know that your faith can keep that black dog at bay, and while it might always be there in the background, you know that your faith is a powerful way of overcoming. Hey, but it's not just depression, and we're almost at news time, and I did want to ask you, because when you talk about career ending, you found yourself in the path of teammate Daniel Bradshaw, and he wasn't able to avoid a collision, and you emerged with massive facial injuries, shocked the medical staff. They said those injuries were consistent with being in a car crash. It really did bring an end to your capacity to at least play those grand finals. This is another moment where you needed faith to succeed, to come through.
Oh, absolutely, yeah. I actually saw the doctor at our Hall of Fame event just recently, and he shared something with me that I'd never known for 20 years, but he talked about my upper jawbone was completely sheared through. I knew that. So literally my face was falling apart. That's how bad the fracture was in my face. But he then described how, as we're getting you off the ground, I could see one eye was popping out and dropping out literally because it had no eye socket to stay into almost. It was so fractured, my face. So yeah, just by the grace of God again, if I'd been hit on the temple, for instance, who knows, I might have been done just being in that accident. It was such a horrendous contact with the hip of my teammate. But the reality is that, again, faith certainly helped me to see a journey beyond football and outside of football well before that. And it was just very easy to, I think I stepped out of football a whole lot easier than, or elite sport, a whole lot easier than a lot of people do who have their identity fully engaged as an athlete and their purpose fully in sport. I think a lot of people get lost because they then start to ask the questions
We'll take a break for news. Faith, football and finals, our conversation. A genuine AFL legend of the game, Shaun Hart, is with us. It is the eve of the AFL Grand Final. Back with more after Vision National News. Good to have you with us. And on the eve of a very big weekend for sports fans, we are talking Faith, football and the finals this hour. The big weekend, of course, the AFL Grand Final. The Collingwood Magpies up against the Brisbane Lions tomorrow at the MCG. In the Rugby League, the Penrith Panthers are up against the Brisbane Broncos at Accor Stadium in Sydney on Sunday evening. Our special guest this hour is Shaun Hart, a genuine AFL legend of the game. He played for the Brisbane Lions, won 3 premierships, 2001 through 2003. He was even Norm Smith medalist on the ground, best on ground 2001 in the grand final. He's currently at the football program at Bond University, where he teaches what's called 3D coaching. We're talking Faith, football and the finals. It is a huge day, given that what's going on, the grand final parade that's happening in Melbourne right now, even as we speak. Shaun, we've only got you for a few more minutes. I just wanted to touch on a few brief things. The thought that, Brisbane's in the spotlight this weekend in a very big way. And I think Brisbane's also in the spotlight coming up a little later on with the Brisbane Roar a little bit later in October. But there's a certain sense in which I guess people in Brisbane ought to feel a little bit of sense of pride with teams in the top levels of the competition.
Oh, absolutely. It's certainly a great time for Brisbane sport at the moment. And outside of the Roar, hopefully the Roar get the job done in that competition. But the Broncos and the Lions would be great to have a double. I just imagine the street parade back up in Brisbane, the celebration, people coming out into the city there. I'd imagine that's what they'll do, ticker tape parade type of thing if they both win. So that'd be significant. I look forward to that if that happens and we get 2 Brisbane teams winning their premierships.
It could be a real time of almost ecstatic feeling of sports victories in the city of Brisbane this weekend. Hey, when you're on the eve of a grand final, and tomorrow, the AFL Grand Final, you've faced grand finals sleepless. Thoughts here about what's going on? I mean, it must be just an enormous pressure on every player about to run onto that field tomorrow.
Yeah, well, my own experience in 2001, seriously, the night before the grand final, I reckon it was a total of 30 minutes of sleep I got. I was actually quite worried when I actually went down to breakfast and thought, oh, gee, I better check in with the psychologist and work out whether I should have a bit more sleep because I've got to play a grand final and I've had 30 minutes of sleep. Just the thoughts of what goes through your mind and, that you play the game over and that, and I just couldn't get it out of my mind, couldn't sleep. But I went to see the psychologist and I said, I've only had 30 minutes. Would it be worth me going back to have a bit more sleep before we get on the bus? He said, no, you could miss a night of sleep. You're that fit a player. You could miss a night of sleep and it wouldn't matter to you. And I'll tell you what, there's another thing that will give you confidence. You're not going to fall asleep on the ground as well. That was what he said to me. So I thought, I'm okay, I'll just have some brekkie and get ready for the game.
Is this the power of the coach who can sow a seed like that? Because ordinarily you might feel like missing a night of sleep could really affect your capacity physically. But is that the power of a word that's spoken by a wise coach when you've got to deal with these sorts of issues with players?
Yeah, it definitely is. It definitely is. And again, that's three-dimensional coaching we talk about really speaks about strategies in the second dimension. How do you help people with motivation, with confidence, with their emotions, with issues of psychology? You can't just be a first-dimensional coach. You need to actually know how to help people. You can have psychologists and that, but great coaches know how to put strategies into place, like on that morning whereby we had people there that could actually help us get our mindset right for the big battle ahead.
These days, you are in this space of coaching, training coaches, training players. The thought that, when you've got players, they're not just there receiving payment for their services. There's something more, isn't there, in when you're training the elite sports person, bringing the best out. How do you talk about, taking leadership, and while it might apply on the sports field, how it might apply in all of the different dimensions of our lives?
So well said, yeah. So we really want to transform coaching, and I mean by that a lot of coaching can be very transactional, about just getting a result together with someone, an outcome, achieving a goal, whereas we'd like all coaching to be transformational. So we talk to coaches about what their coaching purpose is. Is it a purpose that's very transformational? It's beyond the sporting field. Is it all about the person first and their life, and then the last part we think is performance. We sort of have a bit of a saying that if coaches can capture the hearts of their people, they can then also start to transform their life, and then from there we believe they fuel performance. That becomes the last part. They help people get to their personal best, whatever that might look like, whatever skill and gift they have. That becomes the last part because they get the foundation right, and that's why the third dimension particularly is so significant. If we can help people truly discover their true identity, the true purpose that they're created for, and then from there flows self-worth, flows value from the right place. They're not looking to get identity in something in the world, but that leaves them empty eventually, but they're actually on a solid rock of identity and purpose. We believe that will set them up for their whole life of flourishing and having great relationships, and then having significance or influence beyond themselves.
And Sean, I only got you for another few minutes here, just to pick up on something really important, I think, and I know that listeners will be interested in your wisdom. When you're an elite sports person, you need to have a bigger purpose. You're talking about that in the third dimension. The bigger purpose for those players tomorrow, whether they win or lose. I mean, some may go to pieces. Some will be in exhilaration. What are your thoughts about what comes with this dimension of our faith in Christ?
Well, I think the great thing I'd love to say is that do not let performance define who we are. So for whatever happens for any player tomorrow, the support that they have, the people they have around, the greatest thing they can do, whether they win or lose on the ongoing journey of life, is to help them understand they are not defined by their performance in that grand final, whether it's successful or they don't, or their team doesn't win, or they don't play well. But there's a bigger picture, a greater calling, a higher purpose for who they are, a greater identity for who they are beyond how they play on a particular day in a sporting game. And if we have trusted people around us, this is a significant part of 3D coaching, that I believe all of the mental health issues that we are seeing, the epidemic in the world of mental health, is deeply rooted in third dimensional issues of identity and purpose and self-worth and value. It's deeply rooted, and it starts there. It seems like it's a second dimension thing, but I believe it's a spiritual thing, and I think that's where most of it starts, in those issues. But we just need to have, as I did, trusted people that understand that we're spiritual beings first, that we've got a heart and a spirit, and it's the most important part of who we are, and that's the most important foundation for flourishing in life. And so that's what I think is the greatest thing we need to help players tomorrow who either win or lose, and anyone at any level of sport and in our society know that there is a greater purpose, there's a greater calling that you are born for, and only in discovering that can you truly flourish and truly live a life that pleases God and is full of joy and peace.
Wonderful insights, wonderful wisdom, and I hope we can continue a conversation about some of these things perhaps on another day, but time is short. You're in demand. It is the day before. It's the eve of grand final, and Sean Hart, genuine AFL legend of the game, thank you so much for taking some time to share these thoughts and your heart with listeners on the eve of the grand final. Thanks for being with us, Sean.
My pleasure. Go Lions.